John Hively here, Oligarch News, May 31st, 2025. So today we're going to look at a few things the Supreme Court has done to create political corruption, and deliberately so. But more importantly, we're going to look at a little bit of that political corruption that has occurred, that has been allowed to occur. So let's take a look at some of the things the Supreme Court has done. For example, in multiple decisions back in the 70s, the Supreme Court decided that the money that a billionaire decides to give to his favorite political candidate is somehow an expression of free speech equivalent, exactly equivalent to the words that come out of your mouth. In other words, they decided spending cash in the political markets, and that's what it is speech. So the result, of course, was massive corruption, absolute massive corruption. So let's take a look at another way that the Supreme Court has manufactured corruption. And by the way, they make up stories. Speech is not the same as spending money. The words that come out of your mouth is equal to spending millions of dollars in the political markets, or anywhere else for that matter, are not the same. They're not what are called, speech, the words that come out of your mouth. Those used to be called pure speech. And money spent in the political markets used to be called a form of speech that was not pure speech, and therefore you could regulate it. But anyway, let's take a look at what else the Supreme Court has done. For example, what they've done is they've made bribery legal. And that's where we're going to get into an issue on showing the corruption that is occurring at all levels of government, but in particular having to do with the homeless. So here is an AI overview from Google in the June 26, 2024 Supreme Court case, Snyder v. United States. The court ruled that a federal anti-bribery law, specifically 18 U.S.C. -666, only applies to bribes, not after the fact gratuities given to state and local officials. The court held that bribes are payments made before an official act to influence the official, while gratuities, like tips, are given after the act as a reward or token of appreciation. So the court basically ruled that if you want to make a deal with a government official and they deliver the goods to you, and then you give them the money and say it's a tip or a gratuity, by golly, it's no longer a bribe. But if you give them a bribe first, before they deliver the goods, then it's a bribe. So as long as you promise, as long as the government official delivers you the goods, and you give them the money afterwards, the bribe afterwards, it's not a bribe. So things like this have led to all sorts of corruption, and we're going to deal with the homeless issue. Because the homeless issue has become a huge homeless industrial complex in which not a whole lot of homeless, in many cases, are being helped. So let's take a look at one example provided by James Lee.
Imagine a real-life Robin Hood in reverse. Someone who robs from the poor to give to the rich. Except this isn't some sort of dark fairy tale. This is real. I give you Dr. Felicia Adams-𝐾𝐿. She is the ex-CEO of the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, once in charge of managing over $800 million annually in federal, state, county, and city funds for homeless programs, who was recently forced to resign after her mega agency failed multiple audits. Quote, searing audit finds City of LA has failed to properly track billions of dollars in homeless spending.
Dr. Felicia Adams-𝐾𝐿 has resigned and is now the fourth top official at LA's homeless services to leave in just the past 5 years.
And it seemed to me clear.
Well, Los Angeles is spending, or has been spending, billions of dollars to help the homeless. And they're not helping a whole lot of homeless, but they are helping several other people get rich.
Bet you wish you had more time. I promise I care about homeless people. I just don't know where or how we spent billions of dollars. Oh, we know for sure. It's going right there on your neck. Look at that necklace. It's obscene. I mean, if those are real, that's got to be what, $20,000, $30,000 worth of pearls right there? This, ladies and gentlemen, is a homeless administrator in California. So all of that money. Well, first off, she paid herself a monstrous salary, $430,000 a year. Then she funneled millions of dollars into her husband's nonprofit organization. Quote, documents show that Felicia Adams-𝐾𝐿𝐵, chief executive of the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, otherwise known as LAHSA, signed a $2.1 million contract and 2 other contract amendments with Upward Bound House, a Santa Monica-based nonprofit where her husband, Edward 𝐾𝐿𝐵, works in senior leadership. And there
So last year, that agency, which is supposed to help the homeless, spent over $360 million to house how many homeless? Well, let's let James Lee tell us all about it.
give you this statistic. Last year, the agency spent over $367 million to house 878 people. That's over $400,000 per person. For that price, you could literally buy each person a small house. And if that doesn't sound sketchy enough, oh, it gets worse. According to documents released by a whistleblower, for her annual holiday party, Adams-𝐾𝐿𝐵, she really wanted to booze it up apparently and demanded that taxpayers pay for her open bar. But when her associate refused, citing it as a, quote, improper use of public funds, she became, quote, visibly angry and then ended up terminating her employment. That's not only petulant, but also potentially very illegal behavior. After that, she started hiring her friends and family, with whistleblowers alleging that, quote, Adams-𝐾𝐿𝐵 pushed out experienced staff to hire unqualified friends and former subordinates from her previous job into high-level, high-salary LAHSA roles. And then high-salary LAHSA roles. And then when the chickens started coming home to roost, she tried to cover her tracks by, quote, destroying public records. And also arranging to pay hush money, $800,000 to silence whistleblowers. That's $800,000 of my money and your money. It's time.
So even with the homeless industrial complex and the corruption going on there, that's just a small thing. Take a look at what's going on in the U.S. Senate right now, where Republicans are battling it out among themselves over whether or not to drive, I believe it's 7.6 million people from Medicaid, from receiving health insurance, and 3 million more people from getting food stamps in order to save money so that they could pass on this savings to their wealthy bribers, benefactors, and friends in the form of tax cuts, or keeping tax cuts that they already have had and certainly don't need, perpetuated forever. So then you have President Obama, back during the Great Crisis, giving billionaires and super millionaires, people that are worth over $100 million, banks that were going to close, giving those banks to these billionaires and multimillionaires, and giving them for pennies on the dollar, and then providing incentives for these same banksters. It didn't matter if they were Republican or Democrats. Steve Mnuchin, former Treasury Secretary under Donald Trump, President Trump in his first term, he was one of these people who got such a deal from President Obama. And he was only worth about, I think, $108 million at the time. And he had a nice setup in a nice apartment that he owned in New York City. And Mnuchin and others, they got a bank for pennies on the dollar. And then Obama provided them with incentives to boot 9.3 million families, working families, out of their homes. So it's 9.3 million people, actually, some of whom had families and others who didn't. But over 20 million people were kicked out of their homes. And the billionaires received rewards for everyone they kicked out of their homes. So you have a situation where no matter what, the rich are getting richer at the expense of everyone else. And this is all caused by Supreme Court corruption. We're going to get into a lot more of this later on. But for now, I'm done. This is just an overview of what's coming. And if you like what you're seeing today, please do me a favor and like, share, and subscribe. Pass the word on, because I have a battle plan, and I think we can beat back these corrupt bastards and kick their asses and kick the asses of their Supreme Court too, because it's their Supreme Court. It's not theirs. It's not yours. It's theirs. As George Carlin famously said of politicians, they don't give a damn about you. They don't give a damn. They're only there to serve their billionaire masters for the most part. There's a few in there, but they're just a very few that really care about you. Anyway, you guys have a good night, and we'll talk to you later. Thank you.